In the presentation, we're going to cover the definition of conflict management, discuss conflict management theories, identify types and sources of conflict, what kind of paths lead to conflict, some important points to remember within conflict management, and a to-do list to include in the workplace. So what is conflict? If you look in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, you'll find several different definitions. Here, we've got a few of those. A competitive or opposing action of incompatibles, the opposition of persons or forces that give rise to the dramatic action in the drama or fiction, and then a fight, a battle, or a war. Basically, we're looking at some type of disagreement. So a conflict is basically a disagreement through which parties involved perceive a threat to their needs, interests, or concerns. And a conflict includes several things. It includes a disagreement, different parties that are involved, a perceived threat, and the needs, interests, or concerns of one or more of the parties. In one of the conflict management theories, Blake and Mouton propose a grid that shows various conflict approaches. It is based on a grid which comprises of two axes, concern for people and concern for production or results. The 1-1 style is the hands-off approach, often called avoidance. The 1-9 position, also called accommodation, is excessively person-oriented. The 5-5 position represents a willingness to compromise, and the 9-1 is the bullheaded approach, often called competing. The optimum style for reducing conflict is the 9-9 approach, also called collaboration. Thomas and Kilman continued on with the conflict grid in 1970 and identified two conceptually independent dimensions of interpersonal behavior. These are important. They are assertiveness, which is defined as behavior intended to satisfy one's own concerns, and then cooperativeness, which is defined as behavior intended to satisfy another's concerns. Beyond that, they identified 5 conflict handling modes. The competing mode relies on aggressive communication, low regard for relationships, and there's a low level of trust. Accommodating is where one yields their needs to the other needs, preserving the relationship. Avoiding. If we ignore it, it'll go away. You might think this will work, but really, the conflict only festers and grows. Compromising is a series of trade-offs. Collaborating. Pooling of individuals and goals needed to achieve a common goal. It's a win-win. Similarly, there was another theory, Rahim. He based his theory on 2 dimensions, which he labeled as concern for others and concern for self. The distinction yields 5 conflict management styles. Dominating, where there's a high concern for self and low concern for others. Obliging, a low concern for self and high concern for others. Avoiding, a low concern for self and for others. Compromising, an intermediate concern for self and others. And integrating, a high concern for self and for others. Now, it is important to remember that conflicts may originate or start from a number of different sources. Here are a few of them. People or organizations that have different goals. For example, the Department of State Parks may focus on preservation, whereas marketing on sales. Overlapping authority. 2 or more managers claim authority for the same activity. This often leads to conflict between the managers and their employees. Task interdependencies. One member of a group fails to finish a task that the others depend on. Now, we've all been in that group in college or in high school where we always have that one person that you just can't depend on. That's task interdependency. Then we move on to incompatible evaluation or reward system. Employees are evaluated for one thing, but they are told to do something different. Scarce resources. This is where managers can conflict over allocation of resources. When financial resources are scarce, managers can fight over allocations. And then status inconsistencies. Some groups may have higher status than others. There are more sources of conflict beyond this, but this will just give you a basic idea. Here we present 2 different contexts of conflict. The conflict of ideas and the conflict of feelings. Remember that a conflict of ideas at the early stage of a decision-making process is desirable. However, it can be problematic in the later stage when the ideas have already been implemented. Conflict of feelings are often called personality conflicts. Remember, regardless of the type of conflicts can be hard to control once they have begun. the trend is toward escalation and polarization. And when conflict escalates to the point of being out of control, it almost yields negative results. Now let's talk about the different parties involved with the conflict. Interpersonal conflict is between individuals based on differing goals or values. Intragroup conflict occurs within a group or a team. Intergroup, which is a little bit different than intragroup. Intergroup conflict occurs between two or more groups or teams. Managers play a key role in resolution of conflicts with intergroup conflict. So again, intragroup conflict is within the group, intergroup conflict is between groups. Finally, we have interorganizational conflict, and this is across different organizations. Again, so we have four different main types of conflict: interpersonal, intragroup, intergroup, and interorganizational conflict. When a conflict is initiated, there are usually two types of responses: constructive and destructive. Constructive responses are behaviors which keep conflict to a minimum. Destructive responses are behaviors that escalate or prolong the conflict. Constructive responses are task-focused conflict. Mostly they're focusing on task and problem solving. They have a positive effect. Your tension decreases. Overall, your group functioning improves, and often the conflict de-escalates. In a destructive response, often the responses are person-focused. They focus on personalities, there's negative emotions, tension increases, and group functioning decreases, and often the conflict overall escalates. Clearly, as a manager, you don't want the conflict to get out of control and escalate, so you want to know the right techniques to make sure that conflict stays manageable. To a large degree, conflicts are predictable and expectable situations that naturally arise. In research conducted in 2003, a moderate level of conflict across tasks and within a group resulted in increased group performance, while conflict among personalities resulted in lower group performance. You have to remember that there are different conflict management styles, and you should expect different responses based on the type of conflict and these management styles. Response is based on an individual's perceptions of the situation and the way they deal with conflict.